Hey, and welcome to the Jessica Paul podcast. I'm your host, Jess Paul, actress, manifestation expert, and mindset coach. And I'm here to share with you all of my secrets on confidence, success, and the magic of manifestation. If you're ready to dive in deep and see more success in your career, more money in your bank account, and more love in your life, with a whole new level of freedom, then you're in the right place. I'm letting loose on everything you need to take back control of your life, up-level your mindset, and tap into your manifestation powers. I'm so excited that you're here. Hello, gorgeous souls, and welcome back to the third episode of the Jessica Paul podcast. Just before we begin this episode, this is a longer episode today because we've got our first guest speaker on, which is incredibly exciting. But before I start, I just want to do a little sponsor in that I have just announced that I am releasing my Success Momentum coffee mornings again, which it's a totally chilled out space for everybody in my private Facebook community to grab a cuppa, come along, learn about this mindset manifestation work, and even for you guys that have never heard about this work before and you just want to dive a little bit deeper and you want to ask me all the questions, this is the space to do it. So the only requirements for coming in and having these coffee mornings with me for the whole month of November, by the way, guys, every single Sunday, the only requirement is that you are an ambitious soul who wants to take it to another level in your life, who knows that you may be stuck right now, maybe lacking in some motivation, but you know you want to take it to another level. And you have to just be a member of our private Facebook community. So I'm going to put the link in the show notes. You can come and join. The first coffee morning event is going to be this Sunday, the 7th, from 10 a.m. onwards. And as I say, it's going to be every Sunday after that for the month of November. And this is your chance to ask me all the questions you need. So come and join us, follow the link in my bio, become a member of this private community, and I'll see you all on Sunday at 10 a.m., guys, for all of the mindset miracles and manifestation. So for this week's episode, we have a very special guest joining us, and I've literally been following this gorgeous soul for about a year now. So it was definitely a manifestation getting her on as our first guest. So we're welcoming on Persia Lawson. She's an author, speaker, and love coach, passionate about helping you find and keep a healthy, soulful, lasting relationship in the chaos of the modern dating world. And I'm so excited for you all to listen to this because we go in deep on everything to do with love and relationships and dating in this day and age and what manifesting that love really means. And there is just such a ton of insight in there for you. So without further ado, let's welcome her on. Welcome, Persia. So lovely to have you on.
I'm very happy to be on. It's a lovely sunny Monday morning here.
Yeah. Is it sunny where you are? It's
absolutely glorious. I have to say, I feel like autumn in the UK, well, at least where like south near London, which is where I am, is been way nicer than summer was.
Yeah. Do you know what? I'm looking at a completely different story to you right now.
Whereabouts are you?
I'm in Manchester. I mean, it says it all really. Like Manchester's just raining all the time. But yeah, so today particularly is absolutely vile. But I'm feeling all the sunny vibes from you. Yeah, Persia, it's so lovely that you're on because like I was just saying when we were having a little chat before this, I think I heard you on Mel Wells' podcast, Love, Sex and Magic, about a year ago. And it was about a year, well, it's been nearly 2 years for me now, but it was nearly 2 years ago that my ex-boyfriend left me. And I heard you talking about love and relationships. And for me, it really hit home. And a lot of the people listening to my podcast, they know my story and they know that for me, when my ex left me, that was kind of a turning point for me. It was a real pivotal moment in my life. And so that's why you became a huge inspiration to me. And I have been following you since that. So I would love to just start this episode off by just hearing a bit about you and your story. So you can tell everybody listening where you came from and what it is that you do.
Mm-hmm. Well, firstly, I just want to say how much I relate to what you shared about essentially a breakup being the catalyst for you getting into the work you're doing now and being on the path and in the journey that you are now. That was absolutely the case for me. And sometimes, like, when people ask me, you know, how did you get into what you do, I always have to start by saying, like, I am like the least likely person ever to have become a love coach. I used to be an actress. Like, I was a disaster in romance for such a long time, and I know you're an actress as well. So like, oh goodness. Okay, so let's rewind. So basically, growing up, my parents struggled with drug addiction, and I didn't really understand that for a long time, but I just knew stuff wasn't right at home. And my way of dealing with that was two things. It was acting and being on stages, because that way I got that kind of sense of escapism from what was going on at home, and that sense of validation as well, because obviously it's a very sort of, you know, forward facing job. And I also basically boys, that gave me the escapism and validation as well. So it was always like those two things. But so I was having boyfriends from a very young age, and just a lot of drama. Like, from the moment I started getting with boys, there was just drama. What was interesting, it was when my parents got sober, kind of when I was 16, they both went into rehab a few times separately. And so it was an up and down journey, you know, anything is. But it's when they got sober that I actually got even more chaotic in my love life. Like, I cheated on every boyfriend. I just was increasingly being drawn to like drug dealers or addicts, or, you know, bad boys of every shade and color you can possibly imagine. And then when I went to university, it just started really spiraling. Just you know, like sleeping with my boyfriend's best friend. Like, I had a boyfriend in Russia from an acting thing, and his dad was a KGB general, and I cheated on him and gave him chlamydia, and he threatened to have me. Like, when I talk about it now, it just seems so ridiculous. But when I came out of uni, I then went to drama school, which was just, you know, the perfect breeding ground for me to just get even more chaotic with men. And then fast forward to me leaving drama school. And whilst I'd always been, you know, chaotic in my love life, like, I was also, the confusing thing was I was also like an A-star student. So I was able to hide everything and be under the mask, at least to my family, of being like, I've got my shit together, I'm fine. And then when I came out of drama school, I did this acting job in China, and I ended up putting on 2 stone in 2 months. Like, it was just the most insane time of my life. I was not eating, I was eating crap. I was not sleeping. I was drinking way too much beer and just crap, and like just really, really abusive to myself. But actually, that weight gain was the biggest blessing in disguise, because it's the one thing I couldn't hide from my parents. So when they picked me up at the airport after the China gig, my dad basically said, oh, would you, I think it was the end of the summer at that point. He said, oh, would you like to come to Thailand in New Year? Because he always goes on, like, pre-COVID. And he's like health kicks. And I'd been actually to this place with him before, but being a skin actress, I was like, yeah, absolutely. And that was like that was at January 2021. And it was the biggest turning point for me, because before I went, I was given this book by my friend, just completely randomly, called Women Who Love Too Much, which I thought was like, sounded really naff, but actually what it was all about was women who had really dysfunctional relationships. And when I first opened this book, my eyes immediately went to this sentence that said something along the lines of, daughters of addicts will tend to are predisposed to having really dysfunctional relationships with men, something like that. And I suddenly realized, oh, maybe this isn't just me. Maybe this is like a trauma response, basically, which is totally what it was. So when I was on that trip with my dad, one morning he said something to me that completely changed my life. He said, focus on the insides and the outsides will take care of themselves. Because he'd said how much he'd been noticing I was not in a good place. And so, he said this advice completely changed my life. And it was the first time I really heard it. And so when I got back from that trip, I went into therapy. I started going to Al-Anon, which is for a 12-step program for friends and family of addicts and alcoholics. Amazing. I really started taking serious action. Cut to, I'm in a much better place. And of course, what happens then is I attract in a new relationship. And this guy I'd actually known for a long time. And he'd been 6 months out of rehab. So he was still an addict, but at least he was working on his stuff. We were only together a year. And in that time, it was like the best but hardest year of my life. He cheated on me.
Right.
And it was horrific, but it was exactly what I needed, because I cheated on every boyfriend. And it was suddenly like my eyes had been opened of like, this is not okay. And I know that sounds so obvious. Obviously, cheating's not ideal. It's not okay. But I was so numb and I was so away with the fairies that I didn't have any idea what pain my behavior was causing other people, let alone myself. And so that was, you know, like you were talking about being left by your partner. Essentially, he's the one that ended it. And it was the most horrific heartbreak. And it wasn't just because of the breakup with him, it was because of everything that represented, all the trauma from my childhood that it brought up. And it ended up being the biggest opportunity. And I'll cut, the last part of the story is, you know, very long, but I'll put it in a nutshell. So what came out of that heartbreak was, you know, being forced to either like, I'm going to have to go back to all my crazy behavior, or I'm going to use this as an opportunity to go deeper and deeper into my healing. And that's what I did. And then out of that, my friend and I, who was on a similar path to me, we started a positive lifestyle movement for women in their 20s who were struggling kind of through a quarter life crisis. That got a lot of media attention. We got a book deal. And when the book came out in 2016, we got a lot of production companies wanting to make TV shows with us. So it was like the success I'd only dreamed of when I'd been in an actress. But and a year before that, I'd met my now fiance Joe at a festival. And so it was like a lot was going on. And long story short, just when the book came out and we're having all this attention, my business partner said to me, I actually don't want to do this anymore. I kind of feel like we've reached where we were supposed to go, and now it's time for us to go on our separate journeys. And I knew she was right, but it was really hard, because it was like, oh no, I've just hit this place in my career and I had to start again, essentially. But I knew the minute she said that, what I wanted to focus on was helping women in their love lives, because that had always been the area that I'd struggled the most, and the area that I'd, you know, experienced the biggest transformation. So here I am today. Me and my fiance Joe, we bought our first home together at the end of last year. We were supposed to get married last year, but then COVID, and then we were supposed to get married this year, and then COVID. So what we did do is we bought a place in the countryside, and we've got a place in London that we rent. And we bought a little dog who is just sort of curled up next to me.
Oh, amazing. Wow, so much in that. I also want to just say, like, wow, it's so amazing to hear somebody talk so openly about the mistakes you've made, because that's something that I find, you know, when I talk to my clients, people harbor so much guilt around, you know, the mistakes you make in relationships, and, you know, cheating and you know, in society's eyes, not doing the right thing with a relationship, or how you should be acting in a relationship. But the thing is, when you are not aware of who you are as a person, you've got to kind of forgive yourself for these mistakes, because they were always there for you to grow. And I love that you talk so openly about that, because that is so, I'm sure so many people can resonate with that. Everybody's made mistakes in relationships, with love, with everything, because it's messy. It's a messy subject. It's a messy place. And so I love that. But I also love how the similarities with, say, my story, with how it was the pivotal moment for me as well. And what you said there about how it wasn't just about healing from that relationship, it was about healing yourself for all of those years that you had felt lost, that you hadn't loved you. Like, that was exactly what it was for me. You know, it wasn't actually anything to do with him. He was the pivotal moment for me to understand that about myself. And for that reason, now, after doing forgiveness work over this, he's one of the biggest people I thank to this day in my life for making me realize that. And one of the things that I always like to think about is it creates space for the right things to flow in. And that's kind of what it sounded like for you. Kind of, it was the pivotal moment, but when he left and when he cheated on you, it made space for what was actually right to flow into your life. And that's when it always kind of happens, isn't it? And so, okay, I want to ask you, I want to ask you another question. So, you know how you said you had a lot of relationships to that point, and a lot of messy ones, and you were just navigating through, and when you were at drama school as well, like a lot of people can relate, it is like just this whole like cesspit of like just everybody exploring that together. What advice do you have for somebody that actually hasn't had a relationship yet? Because I find this a really interesting subject. Obviously in life, if we want to figure out what we desire, then we actually have to go through that contrast, like you said, and we have to figure out what we want through what we don't want. For me, I've actually only ever had that one relationship. I've only ever been in love once. Like that's how I felt anyway with him. And I was with him for about 5 years on and off. Is that really enough time with one person to understand what you truly want? Or do you believe that we have to go through multiple relationships to figure that out?
Great question. So the first thing I just want to say, when you mentioned people who've not actually had a relationship, I have a flagship program called Get Your Soulmate, and a fair number of women come through and that they have this big shame around it, and they say, obviously like your story, I can relate to some of it, but there's a lot that I can't relate to because I've not had a relationship. And they hold a lot of shame around that. And what I believe is, and what I've certainly seen with my own journey and my clients' journey, is that we are all so different. I believe that we all are here and we all have our own curriculum to work through in our own time. So my journey is going to look different to yours and hers and everyone else's. And what helps me is always to just stop and just say, like, I'm exactly where I'm meant to be. And there is no wrong to my story or the number of relationships I have or haven't had. Like, it's all perfect. This is, where I am right now is where I'm meant to be. And so I can, ultimately all our results that we get in life is based out of the beliefs that we hold. And so the issue is not whether or not you've had one relationship or no relationships, or, dozens and dozens like I had. The important thing to understand is it's what you believe, or what you make that mean, what the story you tell yourself is. Because I could say, well, I've had loads of relationships and I've jumped from this to that. I could make a story up around why that meant, and I did for a long time, why that meant that I could never have a healthy, soulful, lasting relationship, which is really all I ever wanted. I just had no idea how to do it. So arguably I could say it's been more challenging for me, who was used to having so many partners. Like, for me, the commitment part has been really challenging. I've got a book called Love Is Coming. I'll show you it here. I've got one here. There it
lovely.
is.
Oh my God, amazing.
And it's divided into 3 parts, and it's heal, attract, commit. This is the whole vehicle of my work and how I coach and support people. What most people want to do is they want to jump straight into attract and commit, because that's what we want. That's the prize. That's getting the boyfriend. That's getting the wedding ring, or whatever the hell it is. But the problem is, if you don't do the heal work, which is like the least sexy bit, this is the ugly cry sort of area, which obviously you've done as well. But if you don't do that work first and lay that foundation, you may well attract someone, but you will only keep going back to the same old patterns. So whatever the heal work is for you, it might be you need to heal the belief that because you've not had a relationship, that means that you never will. You might need to heal the belief that, like I did, that having multiple and being attracted to really chaotic guys, like I really thought that I would never be able to sustain a relationship. And here I am sat and, been with my partner over nearly 6.5 years now. So it's understanding that the issue is not your reality and your past. The issue is your beliefs about your reality and your past. That's what we need to work on.
Yes. That is so true. Actually, I had a lady come through my academy, and she was getting a little bit frustrated halfway through. She was like, Jess, why is nothing actually manifesting for me yet, tangibly? And I said to her, listen, what intention do you have when you're coming into these sessions in this academy? And she said, well, to manifest my dream life. And I said, what if your intention was simply to heal yourself, like to heal your soul? And she was like, well, but the whole point of this academy is so that I manifest what I want. And I was like, yes, but just try it. Just go into the sessions with that intention and that intention alone. And she did that. And literally over the next 3 weeks, she was like, oh my God, everything is manifested. And it's so true, because when we stop focusing on the actual desire, like a boyfriend or a girlfriend, and we just actually start focusing on what it is that we need to do first, it will come. And that's essentially what you're saying. Like, people don't like to do that part because it is the messy part. It's the part that, like, you are going to ugly cry over, and it's hard. And, you know, diving deep into that shadow work myself was intense, and it's well, it still happens. Like, the work never stops, but like literally just switching that intention to healing, which is obviously why you have those 3 stages to the way that you do your work for women, because it's actually the most important stage. And actually, you're so right. You know, it doesn't matter about the experience that you've had, because I actually do believe, like, yes, I've only had one long-term relationship, one real relationship in my life, but I do believe that over those 5 years, I have learned so freaking much. And because I've done that healing work, like, I actually think that in some ways I know more about what I want than maybe the people that, like you say, haven't done that yet for themselves. For those people that, let's say, maybe haven't had a relationship, or for people that have had multiple but are single right now, which I am myself right now, what advice would you give single people right now, and in particular navigating dating in this day and age where everything is online, dating apps in particular? What your thoughts are on all of that would be amazing to hear.
So my work, like my approach to dating and getting a relationship is actually, it's quite revolutionary, arguably. Yes. It's very against the grain, because we live in a society that has conditioned us to believe, and I hear this all the time from clients who come to work with me, you can only meet someone these days online. I'm like, that's bullshit. I met my partner at a festival. Tons of my clients who originally thought that they could only meet someone online have met people in the most magical love stories. It goes back to your belief. If you say to yourself that that's the only way you can meet someone is online, then that's going to be your truth. So the tenet and like the main message of my book is that we need to stop looking outside of ourselves for the partner we want to get, and we need to start looking inside of ourselves for the partner we want to be. If you stop worrying about finding the partner and you just this is what Get Your Soulmate, it's an 8-week process that takes people deeply through this. If you focus on what do you need to heal and let go of, what do you need to work through from your past, what do you need to get really clear on what kind of relationship and partner is compatible for you and aligns with your values and what you want. If you then look at all of that and become that person that you are desiring to manifest and attract, you will be shocked by the miracles and the coincidences and the synchronicities that start to come about. Like the way that I met my partner, Joe, and I go into it deep in the book, it is like, it does not make sense. Like I cannot describe to you, it does not make sense how we met and the ridiculous coincidences. And I've seen this with so many of my clients now. So I know I wasn't just lucky. It wasn't just a fluke. It's because we chose to approach our love life in a different way from the inside out, which goes against everything that we are taught in the modern day around how to attract love. And, there is just such a focus on, I think, in everything. And I think this is even the spiritual and wellness worlds. We've all got swept into this thing because we live in such a, arguably, not even arguably, let's be honest, superficial and consumerist society. So our whole life becomes about what can I get? What can I get? What partner can I get? And it's whilst it's, of course, we are allowed to desire things and have what we desire. But if we shift our thinking to what kind of person do I want to be? What kind of friend do I want to be? What kind of daughter? What kind of sibling? How can I show up in my work to be more loving, more compassionate, at the same time as having boundaries and being good at communication. There's so many skill sets that we need to master to become a good partner. And that honestly takes up all our time. And we focus on that, then we actually open up a lot of space for that magical love story to show up in our life when the time is right. And that means that we have to, this is the hard part, especially for someone as impatient as myself, let go of the timeline, let go of the who, the how, and the when that person's going to show up. And that's what I talk about a lot in my book, because I've always been, as I said earlier, an overachiever. So I want it, and I want it yesterday. And I will, I'm willing to work hard and do whatever it takes. But so much of my journey and what I teach now is around the idea of surrendering and letting go of how you think it should happen. Because honestly, I could not have written the love story that has happened with me and Joe. Like, it's way better than I could have ever possibly imagined for myself. And I've seen that again with clients. So believe that it can be even better than you think, but you've got to get out of your own way.
Yeah, that is so true. That whole surrender aspect. And you know what? That is literally the hardest part, isn't it? It's the hardest part of creating anything in your life, and especially with love and relationships. One of the things that I discovered about myself when I was doing a bit of shadow work around relationships myself was that society really does lay it all out for you. It goes, it tells you need a partner. And that, again, you're thinking timeline, oh my gosh, I need it, so I need it now. And actually, when I was touring, I toured with a show. I toured a lot with girls who were just that little bit older than me. So they were in their mid 30s, heading into late 30s. And there's some of the conversations I'd hear, because this is a really important topic for women that are at that age, at that stage in their life, where they're thinking, okay, well, I've got a body clock. How can you tell me to surrender when I have a freaking body clock? Like, how do I do that? And that is probably one of the hardest parts of the whole process, isn't it? So you talk about that a lot in your book, did you say?
Yeah, a lot. And I work with a lot of really successful women, like really successful, top of their field. And so they've got the double whammy of, like you said, it's like, when we're in our 30s and we've got a biological clock as a woman, that and the pressure that we get from family, society, being, feeling like we're the only single person in our peer group, mixed with these women are used to getting what they want in work, and actually from operating from that more masculine approach, focus, get it done, blah, blah, blah. That doesn't work in their love life. And this is what I say to them: you need to surrender more because of that. Look at nature. Nature doesn't rush, and yet everything happens and it all flows. So it actually puts you in the best place. It's just that that's such a hard thing to wrap your head around, because it's so against what we are taught in our culture. So it's not to say give up the desire. And I'm also not going to say that you're going to have a baby. Like, how could I possibly know? But I know that the best opportunity or possibility for you is to get into alignment, connect to what I believe is, a higher power. So that can be whatever you interpret that as being. For some that might mean God, for some that might just mean, life. Again, look at nature. There is clearly some sort of force that moves through nature that enables as Marianne Williamson always says, the acorn to become the oak tree, the embryo to become the baby, the bud to become the flower. All of these processes happen organically because they allow the process to just unfold naturally instead of resisting it. And actually, by us, and this is, I'm saying these things to myself because there's something going on in my career at the moment. I'm like, I need to hear this, because it's true of every area in life, not just relationships. Stop pushing, stop forcing it, stop trying to make it happen, because it doesn't work. I have to remind myself of this every single day. This actually reminds me of in fact, I feel called to share the extended serenity prayer, because it's so helpful.
Oh, go for it.
So the serenity prayer, a lot of people will probably recognize the first half. This is what they say in a lot of 12-step rooms, but the extended serenity prayer just blows my mind. Okay, so if you're listening, maybe just close your eyes as I say this, because it's so powerful. So this is the serenity prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Grant me patience with the changes that take time, appreciation of all that I have, tolerance for those with different struggles, and the strength to get up and try again, one day at a time. And that's it.
Wow.
Like, even just feeling like how much calmer you feel when you ground yourself in saying those words, which ultimately are about this idea that focus on what you actually have power over. The problem is, and this is so true in our dating life, we all too often are trying to force or make something happen or have power over something that actually we have no power over, i.e. getting him to text us back, getting him to actually fall in love with us, whatever it is. And we're not putting our energy into the things that we do have power over, how we're showing up, our boundaries, doing our healing work. I mean, the list goes on.
Yes.
So that's it. And this is kind of what you were saying earlier. It's like realizing that, you know, this is where I think people get manifestations so wrong. We think that we need to like squeeze it and force it to happen. And actually manifestation takes care of itself when you're clear on what you desire and how you desire to feel. Yes. And you just listen to what is the next right step, as Oprah says. But actually the making of that happen, that's not our job. It's not our job to make it happen.
No. And do you know what? Gosh, I resonate with all of that. And thank you for saying that prayer as well, because all of that, something in particular that I resonated with so much there was in business, and you know, not just business, like, you know, I'm coaching a lot of entrepreneurs, but I'm coaching a lot of creative women, like, you know, actors like myself as well, who are always striving. And one of the things you said was, in some respects, we're used to getting what we want. Right? Because we make it happen. Like, you know, I've made it happen for myself over the past 2 years in terms of my own business. And I'm so used to that now. And I'm also used to it because I am in the belief that, you know, if you believe that you have it, then you will get it within the law of attraction. However, if you're in this belief that you're so in this belief, I always get what I want, and it's still not happening, all you end up doing is falling into frustration vibe. And frustration vibe is something I talk about all the time with my clients, because it's something that so many of us live with, especially high achievers. You know, it's the vibration that every high achiever always falls into the trap of, because we know that we've done the work. We know that we can get it. You know, there is that belief there that I can have this thing. It will happen for me, but why isn't it here yet? And especially for relationships, we have to remember that there's free will involved. Like, you know, we're dealing with people, other people. It's not like we're trying to manifest a car. Like, we're dealing with a person, and that has to be dealt with in a natural way. Like you said, what you were saying there, like, everything in nature, everything always works itself out. You know, we're not controlling how a tree grows. It just grows. We're not controlling how all of that works. It still happens. And I think we have to remember that when it comes to relationships, because we're forming relationships with other human beings who have their own vibration, who have their own journeys and their own healing processes. And for that reason, it's more complicated trying to manifest a partner into your life, because you've got to remember that. And I think in remembering that, the only thing you can do is let go, because you can't be in control of that other person, you know? And I get this, I had this a lot, actually. I'm going to talk a little bit about my own experience again, and again, be open and honest, like you've been open and honest. When my ex left me, I went down a hole on YouTube, right? I wish I'd come across you first, but I went down a hole on YouTube for some people who I actually strongly disagree with now. I'm not going to say the names, but where they were like, how to win your ex back, you know, all of these videos, which I'm sure you have strong opinions on yourself. And I was vulnerable at that time. So I went down this hole of, how do I win him back? Control, which is always the energy that I was in, this very masculine energy. And I've had to work harder at my feminine. And I was there every night. I wouldn't sleep. I'd be like, okay, the no contact rule. That was something that came up, and I did this, and it was the worst thing for me. Actually, what are your opinions on some of the stuff that you hear on the internet Like, is there anything that you do come across in the internet that you just strongly disagree with? What would that be?
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of what you said there. Listen, I love a clickbaity title as much as the next one, and you'll find a lot of mine are, because I believe it's marketing, and I believe that I have something important to share, and you want to make it really accessible for people. However, I also believe that if the content that you're sharing is not healthy, compassionate, mature, like good content, like if you're saying to people, yeah, this is how to win the ex back, and not thinking about, well, maybe you should be asking, why on earth do you even want to win back someone who's made it quite clear that they don't want to be with you? That is just illogical to me. And I think it really, like you said, it preys on people in their vulnerability, and it's not helpful, and it actually can cause a lot of damage. So I really disagree with that sort of content, unless it's going to be like how to win your ex back, and basically the answer is don't try and win your ex back. But the focus on you, I think I definitely got a podcast episode around this subject where I talk about all of these people on YouTube who were telling you, and like the 5 best text messages to make him fall in love with you, and I'm like listen, what that might work in the short term to superficially hook someone in, but it is not going to give you a healthy, soulful, lasting relationship. And it's why I also, if I'm honest, feel somewhat ambivalent and conflicted around the people, and there are a lot of people who are love coaches who are teaching you how to get and keep a great relationship, and they don't have that themselves. And for me, I'm a bit like, well, why would I wouldn't go and learn from a business coach who hasn't achieved what they're teaching me how to achieve. So I don't know, like I feel like you can teach whatever in love if you have mastered that yourself, or same as anything, it's like you have to have had a degree of mastery of that subject to be able to teach on it with any sort of authority. So that was just a side note there. So that's kind of my response to what you were saying around all of those people who are sharing content that I think is questionable morally. I think is quite questionable.
It is.
But it gets the hits. That's why it gets the hits.
100. This is why I was diving down the hole, because it was there in front of me. But you're right. But again, like it's actually a practice in boundaries and respect for yourself as well, because just respecting yourself, knowing that what you're listening to might not be there for your greatest good in that time. And again, the only way that I was ever going to learn that for myself, and the only way that I ever did learn that for myself, was when I went in and healed myself and focused on myself, which is obviously the first stage in what you teach women. And that's when I could then actually look at those videos and be like, don't agree. But let's just change the subject slightly. I want to talk about this because I want to know your thoughts on it. Basically, for people that are single right now and that do want to go out and have fun, which is great, what are your thoughts on casual sex? Because for me, this has been something that actually I've been thinking about a lot recently, because I have had my stage, right? I've had the fun stage, and there's actually like a limit to how fun it gets. And I recently sat down with a friend and I said, listen, I think I need a detox, because not that like I'm massively sleeping around at the moment, but just that when I do now have that, it drains me, like majorly drains me, like to the point where I'm like, oh my God, my energy has completely gone. Like, what's going on? It doesn't feel fun. Like, what are your thoughts around that, and like navigating it and doing it? Not obviously you can't like do it in a right way, but like doing it in a way that actually is not going to drain you in that sense.
Oh my God, I love that you went there. This is something I absolutely can hands up say I'm an authority on, because one night stands and all of that was like how I mean, it feels so long ago for me now, but it was how I operated from teenage years to mid-20s, like, so a good solid decade of sleeping with all and sundry. And listen, okay, the first thing I want to say is I believe that this is a personal journey. There is no absolutes, but be fucking honest with yourself. I'm sorry, I swear a lot. I should have
I do, don't worry.
Okay, fine. Yeah, be honest with yourself, because the fact is that men and women have different biological responses to sex. When men have sex, they release dopamine, which is the pleasure hormone. So they might enjoy sex with you, but it doesn't make them feel bonded to you in the same way that when us women have sex, we release a chemical called oxytocin, which is the cuddle hormone. If you think about it, you know, this is what we needed to happen in terms of nature, because women are pregnant. So men can just go around and sleep with a load of women and get a shit ton of women pregnant. We can only be pregnant once at one time. And so I had to be honest with myself that when I was sleeping around under the guise of I'm an empowered woman, yeah, I'm Samantha from Sex and the City, and I can do this and I don't give a shit, it was bullshit. The reason I was doing that was because I wanted to be loved, and I wanted to be valued, and I wanted to be seen. So that's the first thing I want to say to you, right? If you recognize this in yourself, why do you really want to have that one night stand? Is it for that attention? Is it for that validation? Is it because us women kid ourselves because, you know, men can say all the right things in the moment, you can feel loved in that moment because it can feel like love. And then we wonder why the next day, and I'm not saying this is always the case, but I'd say at least 80% of the time it's the case, they're kind of, it's done now, you know, it's like, on to the next, or that, you know, we might be having sex with someone. This was always me. We're having sex, and what I wanted was love, and what I wanted was a relationship. And so when we would have sex and they would just sort of ghost me, or I didn't really hear from them again, it would really hurt. And I would pretend to myself that I was fine, and I wasn't fine. So be honest. Like, I love that you have been honest there, Jess, and said, like, yeah, I'll be honest, it drains me, it doesn't feel good. And so that is your information, that is your body saying to you, yeah, this doesn't feel good to me. I have a whole chapter in my book around this subject, and what I did when I first met Joe, like the exact words that I said, so that you know, so many women think that they can't own their desire and their truth. Like, if they don't want to have sex because they know it will make them feel bonded, and they don't want to go through that whole thing, they're too scared to say it. And so my whole approach is like, be honest first, be honest with yourself, and then, and this is, again, it's a skill set that's, you know, around like what language to use, how to approach the conversation, because it's scary when you first do it. But, you know, own it with the other person, because if they are the wrong guy, they will disappear. If they're the right guy, they will stay. And that's exactly what happened with Joe. And again, I've seen it with so many clients. You deserve to feel respected and to feel honored, but you cannot expect a guy to do that if you're not willing to give that to yourself.
That is so true. What you said there about how, you know, I'm this empowered woman, and I'm doing it because it's fun, and because I deserve it, because it's the 21st century, and I can do this. That is totally the mindset that I was in for a while. Like, just this kind of like, I get to do this. Like, I'm empowered. I know myself. I know my worth, and all of this. Because obviously, you know, I have done a lot of my mindset. However, I wasn't being honest with myself when it came to men. Like, I wasn't. I was covering it up with that kind of bad bitch empowerment.
Yeah.
And actually, that wasn't what my body was telling me I wanted. And you're so right. Like, I actually feel like for me, over the past few weeks, that's when I got really, really honest with myself, and sat down and sat down and said, I need a detox from all of this. And not saying that I'm going to like shut things down in the moment, if you know, because it might feel right, you know, in the moment, but just actively just taking that step back for me has been huge energetically. Like, and again, I suppose that if you get honest and you do energetically take that time for yourself, allow that cup to be filled again, then you're going to more likely attract in the right person. So that's been like a huge thing for me, but it's interesting to hear your thoughts on that. I wanted to ask for people that are in a relationship right now. So obviously I'm not, but there's probably plenty of people that'll be listening that are. What would you say like the do's and don'ts are for navigating in a relationship? Because also some of the things that I've reflected on once I kind of sat back and thought about my past relationship and all the lessons it taught me, I was like, oh wow, yes, actually, like I was doing something in that moment that maybe I shouldn't have been doing if I'd have known better. Like, what are the kind of what would you say the again, there's no right or wrong, but in like in living in a healthy relationship, obviously you're in one right now, how do you work with your partner?
The first thing I'd say is the most important thing is a relationship will only be as healthy as the two individuals in that relationship. And again, not expected to be perfect, but our relationship with ourselves sets the tone for the relationship. So we have to be willing to prioritize that above the relationship. Our relationship with ourselves is more important than the relationship. Okay. Makes me think of that quote by Khalil Gibran, who wrote The Prophet. And he says this about marriage, but I believe it's the same of all relationships. For a healthy relationship, you should be like the pillars in a temple. So you're not too close together. You're not too far apart. You're sort of the right amount. You've got your own thing going on. You're two individuals. Yeah. You've got separate hobbies and interests and friendships outside of the relationship. And then you also have the relationship as a space to share and support and encourage one another. And so you do have things that are part of the relationship, but you have things that are separate from the relationship. So, again, I talk about this a lot in the last section of my book, which is commit. And, what do you do when you get the relationship? Because no one wants to talk about that. We're so fixated on getting the good relationship. Yeah. And like I always say, the first year of any new relationship, doesn't matter how healthy you both are, all of your stuff will come up because the other person will always be the mirror. And so, the late and great Dr. Wayne Dyer once said, we don't attract who we want, we attract who we are. Yes. So what that means is, it doesn't mean that if I attract a jealous person, I'm jealous. What it means is I will attract the person who will bring up any of my stuff. So for example, if I'm really insecure, you better believe I'm going to attract someone who's going to trigger my insecurity. Yeah. If I'm really controlling, I'm going to attract someone who I'm just going to want to control. And so that's why if we work on ourselves, then, the better my relationship is with me, then I'm going to attract someone who reflects that. So when I attracted Joe, I was in the best place I'd ever been in. Yeah. And so he brought out my best qualities. And of course, there was work to do. So he also, in one particular area, there was a deep trigger that was terrifying to me. And I am honest, I'll be honest, I reacted so badly because it was so traumatic for me. And it was, to anyone else, it was like, that's not that big a deal, Persia. But I'm like, for me, it's like my whole body went into trauma around this one thing. And so I did what I needed to do. I got myself into therapy. I was going to my Al-Anon meetings, to Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous, which I've been going to for a long time, getting mentoring, getting coaching, all of the things I needed to do to work through that stuff. And now that issue back then, I was like, oh my God, it was just no big, it's kind of funny to me. I can't even imagine that I was, struggled that much. Now, again, to be fully transparent, we've had a really challenging year in our relationship, and not challenging by my old relationship standards or by a lot of others. It's not like we've been screaming. It's not been awful in any way. It's not even been bad, but we haven't been connected in the same way, largely because we've moved out to the countryside. The first 4 months were in lockdown, so I was on my own a lot. He was working away a lot, and I didn't really know anyone around here. And so because we're both extroverts, like that really, lockdown, it really affected me. I've had stuff going on in my family. It's just been a really challenging year. And the last part of it, that's why, I was determined to make the last part of it finish on a high. And I absolutely have felt that shift. But we had a really rocky moment about 5 weeks ago or so. And I'm so grateful for that, because when we go through shit, we did what we needed to do. We sat down, we talked through it all. There were tears, there was a little bit of anger, but we got through it all. And now we are stronger than ever. And, we booked to go to traveling is a really important part of our relationship. This is another thing I'd always say, is you've got to get clear on what are your key non-negotiables. And for us, it's always been traveling and festivals. We met at a festival, but traveling for us, it's being in a new place. We do a lot of sort of spiritual work when we go traveling. And so, obviously we've not been able to do that with COVID, but we booked to go to Costa Rica for 6 weeks at the end of December. So we'll be away for the whole of January. Amazing. Thank God. Yeah. Because that's last year, or this year was the first time we hadn't been away. And I know this sounds like a really first world problem. For everyone, it's different. It took me a long time to be in a position to even be able to afford to go away like that. Yeah. But now for Joe and I, that's a priority. And we have, we will put our savings, every time we get paid or whatever, we will put savings aside for that, because we prioritize that. And it's really important to us. So you have to know, what are your values as an individual and what are your values as a couple? And you step into them. What do you need to do to make that happen?
That's so true. And actually something that I just thought of then for me and my own personal experience is that there's a fine line between what's a boundary that you're setting in a relationship and what's actually a trigger that you know you need to work through for the growth of the relationship. You know, I feel like what I do personally still, which I'm working through, is I'm very good at setting boundaries. Very, very good at laying that line down and being absolutely not. I respect myself enough. I know what my values are. But there's a difference between doing that and, you know, shutting the relationship down with someone and actually going, okay, well, what's the boundary and what's actually the trigger that's there for my growth, for the growth of the relationship, for the values of for us as a couple. And I think this is something that a pattern of mine that, again, like I am still working through, is just this kind of, no, that doesn't align with my values, so absolutely not. And being too set in a boundary and not actually allowing the flow of that relationship. And I can see now, just after you were saying that, I was just working through my own pattern in my head and going, yeah, that is something I do. So it's really, really interesting that. Really,
I just want to say on that note, I've got something called the 80-20 rule, which is basically, listen, you are always going to have crap. It's going to be something in a relationship that's hard. And like you said, it's like that's there for your growth and that's there to work through. And so when people say, well, how do I know whether that is a like red flag and I need to leave, or actually it's just like a opportunity for growth? Because I believe that we attract the people who offer the maximum opportunity for growth and healing. And that's what I always say. It's like, look over the whole, not just like when you're going through a tricky phase, like look through the whole of the sort of relationship. When you look back, when I look back at the 6.5 years I've been with Joe, I would say 80% of the time it's been great. It's been easy. It's flowed. 20% has been excruciatingly hard. And that 20% is where I've had to grow and I've had to go really deep in the work. And if I look by contrast to other relationships, it was like 50-50 good and bad. For me, though, those are not good enough odds. I don't want to know that if I meet up with you or with whatever, it's going to be like, might be good, or it might be shit. Like that, for me, those odds don't work. It's like you want the relationship to be able to be sustainable. And like even with stuff that Joe and I have gone through this year, it's not like it's been awful and I'm like wanting to, it's not that, it's just that it wasn't as good as it could be, if that makes sense.
That makes so much sense. I like the thought of thinking about it in those odds, being like, listen, if it is a 50-50, then that's not good enough. Like that's the standard that you have to go, okay, that's not living up to a standard that I set for myself. However, there needs to be that waiver of that 20% where you go, listen, this is bound to happen in a relationship where people have free will. But just knowing that there's that level that you set your standard in that way. 85% of the time it's got to be this you know, for my values. But then you have to let that 20% just flow and go with it. No, I love that. I really love that. And that's actually really made me think. I want to ask you a question about soulmates, because this is something that a question that comes up all the time. What is your view on this? Is there a soulmate for everyone, or do you believe that we have millions of soulmates that we could bump into, or what are your thoughts on this?
Might not be what you're expecting, but I do believe we have a soulmate. Every single one of us does. But the catch is, it's you.
Yes.
It's you. And so I don't believe that there is this one magical person in relationship that is going to fix it all. No, I believe that we have, and by the way, soulmates, I have so many female soulmates like that we just get, and it's easy. And my definition of soulmate is like, really, it's like, you just can be yourself. You don't even have to think about it. It's just easy. You can talk about anything. You don't worry about them thinking that you're weird. Like, you know, that is what a soulmate is, and that ability to connect with someone. And it might not necessarily be that you talk about things in like typical spiritual terms, but actually you are talking about spiritual terms, but it might not be the language that you're using, if that makes sense. So I believe that if you see yourself as your soulmate, if you realize that the one that you've been waiting for and looking for is yourself, and you make that your number one priority, then soulmates, as in romantic partners who you could have a healthy, soulful, lasting relationship with, because that's always my marker for it, healthy, soulful, and at least the potential to be lasting. It might not end up being lasting, but the potential to be lasting, which means that you're compatible. And that's what we've just been talking about. The 50-50, that for me is not compatible. 80-20 of good and bad, that's compatible. So that's what I believe is like, you know, wherever you go, if you are in alignment with yourself and you're open, then soulmate partners they can come from anywhere. Like if I hadn't ended up with Joe in the most like crazy synchronistic magical way that I did, do I think, well, that was it, that was my one shot? No, of course not. Of course not. I don't believe that at all. And I don't think it serves us to limit ourselves like that. It's realizing that firstly, come on, let's use our brains. There's billions of people on this bloody planet. There's tons who would be so compatible for you. And I'm sure there would be others for me and Joe. But the fact is, it's like, look where you are right now, because wherever you are right now is exactly where you're meant to be. And you've attracted exactly who you've meant to learn the lesson you need to learn. And that might not be right now romance. You might have attracted a really difficult friendship, and you need to practice a certain skill set around that friendship that's going to really serve you in your romantic life further down the line. So wherever you are is perfect. I happen to be in a relationship with a man called Joe, living in the countryside with our cockapoo puppy. And actually, my God, the lessons I've learned this year, I'm where I'm meant to be because I choose to believe that. And that is when my life starts flowing and feeling amazing.
I love that. I'm where I'm meant to be because I choose that. Like that actually is so powerful. And I actually think this is a great place to kind of wrap things up with that final bit of advice, because I was going to ask you, what's like the biggest bit of advice for love and relationships and dating, but I think you've kind of summed it up there, just being like, you are your own soulmate, fall in love with you first. And that, is so powerful. Persia, I just want to thank you so much for coming on here. I feel like this was definitely a manifestation of mine, because I could follow you for a while, and I had messaged your assistant quite a few times, and I was like, I just want to talk to her about love and relationships. This is what I'm manifesting for my podcast. And of course, you're now going to be my first guest on here, which is just incredible. I would love for you to just let everybody know, because I know you've got a few things coming up, which I'm sure lots of people will be interested in. So just let us know where we can find you, what you have coming up, and, and of course, I will put all the links in my show notes.
Perfect. Okay. So the best way to find out everything of what I do and how I can support you, whether that's through self-study programs or coaching, is my website, which is just persialawson.com. I'm very active on Instagram, do lots of IGTVs and things like that. So that's just at Persia Lawson as well. I've got a podcast called Love is Coming. That is all around helping you attract and keep amazing romantic love. I've got a book which I've already shown you. It's on Amazon, Love is Coming, How to Find Real Love in a Superficial World. And I wrote this, it's very like, I have another book that came out in 2016 called The Inner Fix, and that's much more of it's actually here. There we go. That's the other one. Love this book. This is like very much, it's more of a workbook vibe. And so very like, well, actually any age, but we wrote it for women in their 20s who were struggling with a quarter life crisis. But Love is Coming is much more like entertainment, like you learn lessons in it, but there's some bloody funny stories, some very sad stories, I wanted it to be like a bit of a beach read or a sort of Christmas. It's good Christmas, but very good book to buy friends for Christmas. But what have I got coming up? So on Monday the 8th of November 2021, just for whoever's listening to this episode further down the line, I have got one of my famous masterclass that I run every year, and it's called How to Get Attractive, Successful, Emotionally Available Men Begging to Date and Commit to You. Ooh. Which I'm aware is a very clickbaity title, but it is actually a really powerful training. It really is a really, really powerful training. And I just share the specific tools that I use myself to go from being a disaster in my love life to attracting the amazing man and relationship I have today. And it's the framework that I've helped tons of women do the same. So lots of different stuff there.
Amazing. Yeah. Well, I am definitely going to be ordering your book straight away. I'll be on. Can we get that off Amazon?
Yeah. Just put it into Amazon. I can give you a link because we've got some free bonuses that come with it. So I can give you the link for that as well.
Fabulous. Well, all of that will be linked in the show notes. But Persia, thank you so much for coming on. And I will be keeping up to date with everything. And for everybody interested, again, just go and follow her and hear more of her wisdom on love and relationships. Thank you so much, Persia.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in, guys. If this episode resonated with you, share it with a friend who you think would love it too. And if you want to let me know how you found it, just screenshot this episode add it to your Instagram story, and tag me at I am Jessica Paul so that I can throw all the love right back at you. And of course, subscribe, hit those 5 stars, and leave a review to show your support and to keep the good stuff coming. Sending you so much love and gratitude from your girl Jess.